People often tell me that I must miss the old days. They smile gently, as if they're speaking about a beautiful dream that slipped away. They imagine quiet mornings, friendly neighbors, homemade meals, and a slower, happier life. They picture a world without constant noise, endless bills, or digital distractions. They say, life must have been so much simpler back then. Every time I hear those words, I can't help but smile. Not because they're right, but because they have no idea what those simple days were really like. My name is Cicely, and I am 91 years old. I have lived long enough to see the world change in ways I never imagined possible. I have watched people land on the moon, computers fit inside a pocket, and strangers speak to each other across oceans in seconds. Yet despite all these incredible changes, one thing has always surprised me: the way people romanticize the past. The truth is, my childhood was never easy. I was born in rural Ohio in 1933, during a time when survival came before comfort. Our house had no central heating, and winter wasn't something you escaped by turning up a thermostat. The cold lived inside the walls, inside the floors, and sometimes even inside your bones. I still remember waking up one January morning and seeing my breath in the kitchen because the temperature inside our home had dropped so low. My mother wrapped all four of us children in blankets before serving us a small bowl of hot cornmeal. She didn't apologize for how little we had. Instead, she simply told us to be grateful that we had food and a warm stove. That was what people now call the good old days. We didn't own extra clothes. I wore the same dress to school several days in a row because it was the only one without a large tear. My shoes were often too small, but buying new ones meant sacrificing something more important. Every penny had a purpose. Every meal was carefully planned. Every winter felt like a battle against nature itself. People today often believe that life was peaceful because it moved slowly. They imagine families gathered around the dinner table every evening, children playing outside until sunset, and communities where everyone knew each other. Some of that was true, but they forget the endless work hidden behind those memories. Before sunrise, fathers were already leaving for work. Mothers were lighting fires, baking bread, washing clothes by hand, and preparing for another exhausting day. There were no shortcuts, no machines to save time, and certainly no weekends free from responsibility. Sometimes I wonder what would happen if a young person today spent just 1 week living the life I had as a child. 1 week without central heating. 1 week wearing clothes that barely kept out the cold. 1 week waking before dawn to light a fire, hauling water, cooking every meal from scratch, and studying by the dim light of a kerosene lamp after finishing all the household chores. I don't ask this to criticize anyone. I ask because most people have never been forced to discover how much hardship a human being can truly endure. When life gives you no choice, you simply keep going. That is the greatest misunderstanding about the past. People say it was simpler, but simple does not mean easy. Simple only meant that there were fewer choices. The work was obvious, and it had to be done whether you felt ready or not. There was no time to wonder if life was fair. Fairness was a luxury for people who could afford to think about it. My family couldn't. We only knew that tomorrow would arrive whether we were prepared or not. So when people tell me they wish they had lived in those simpler times, I don't argue with them. I simply wish they could see the whole picture instead of the postcard. Because behind every warm memory was cold, hunger, sacrifice, and quiet endurance. And only by understanding that truth can we truly appreciate both the struggles of the past and the comforts we enjoy today. When people ask me what I remember most about my childhood, they expect me to talk about birthdays, Christmas mornings, or games I played with friends. The truth is, I remember work. I remember waking before the sun, hearing the wind rattle the windows, and knowing there were chores waiting long before breakfast. Childhood, for many families like mine, wasn't a time of endless laughter. It was the beginning of learning how to survive. My mother was the strongest person I have ever known. Every morning, without fail, she woke up at 4:30. By the time the rest of us opened our eyes, she had already lit the stove, prepared breakfast, and started planning another day that seemed impossible to finish. Looking back now, I don't know where she found the strength. She never complained, never asked why life had been so unfair to her. She simply kept moving because 4 children depended on her. I used to watch her hands while she worked. They were rough from years of washing clothes by hand and chopping wood for the stove. In winter, the skin on her fingers cracked until they bled, but she wrapped them with strips of old cloth and continued kneading bread as if nothing had happened. When I asked whether they hurt, she smiled and said, "Pain doesn't cook dinner." Those words stayed with me for the rest of my life. We never wasted anything. Leftover bread became tomorrow's breakfast. Old dresses were turned into quilts. Broken furniture was repaired again and again until there was nothing left to fix. My mother believed that every object deserved one more chance before being thrown away. Today people replace things so easily, but back then replacing something wasn't an option. We learned to appreciate what we had because we knew exactly how hard it was to earn. Despite everything, my mother made sure we understood the importance of kindness. If a neighbor had even less than we did, she would quietly leave a loaf of bread on their porch without telling anyone. I remember asking how we could afford to give food away when we barely had enough ourselves. She looked at me and said, "One hungry family should never ignore another." It took me decades to understand what she meant. Generosity isn't measured by how much you have. It's measured by what you're willing to share when giving something away actually costs you. There were nights when I heard my mother crying after she thought we had all fallen asleep. She believed she hid her tears well, but children notice more than adults realize. The next morning, however, she greeted us with the same gentle smile and the same quiet determination. She taught me that courage isn't about pretending life is easy. Courage is getting out of bed even when your heart is heavy, because someone else needs you. As I grew older, I realized that my mother wasn't extraordinary because she never struggled. She was extraordinary because she refused to let hardship define her. She couldn't control poverty, harsh winters, or the uncertainty of tomorrow, but she could choose how she faced them. That lesson became the foundation of my own life. Whenever I encountered heartbreak or disappointment, I remembered her hands, her smile, and those simple words, "Pain doesn't cook dinner." She never called herself a hero. She was simply a mother doing everything she could. Yet, after 91 years of living, I can honestly say that no teacher, no book, and no successful person has ever taught me more about strength than the woman who quietly woke up every morning before dawn to keep her family alive. I was 14 years old when my childhood ended. No one announced it. There was no ceremony, no warning, and certainly no time to prepare. One ordinary afternoon, my father collapsed while repairing a fence behind our house. By the time the doctor arrived from the neighboring town, it was already too late. He had suffered a massive heart attack, and within a few hours, the man who had carried our family through every hardship was gone forever. I remember standing beside my mother at his funeral, holding her hand as tightly as I could. She didn't cry in front of anyone. Her face was pale, almost expressionless, as if she were trying to convince herself that if she stayed strong for one more hour, she could somehow survive the impossible. But that night, after everyone had gone home, I heard her sobbing through the thin bedroom wall. It was the first time I realized that even the strongest people eventually break. The next morning, the sun rose exactly as it always had. The chickens still needed feeding. The fire still had to be lit. My younger brothers and sisters still needed breakfast before school. Life didn't pause simply because our hearts were shattered. Bills still arrived. Chores still waited. Hunger didn't care about grief. Without anyone saying the words aloud, I understood that things had changed forever. At 15, I became the second adult in our home. I learned how to stretch every dollar my father had left behind. I cooked meals that were never fancy, but always enough to keep everyone going. I washed mountains of laundry, cleaned the house, helped my younger siblings with their schoolwork, and comforted them whenever they cried because they missed Dad. There were evenings when I fell asleep sitting at the kitchen table before finishing my homework, too exhausted to keep my eyes open. Sometimes my teachers asked why I looked so tired. I smiled and told them I hadn't slept well. I never explained that before coming to school. I had already spent hours chopping wood, carrying water, preparing breakfast, and making sure everyone else had what they needed. Back then, there wasn't much room for complaints. You simply did what your family required because there was no one else who could do it. Looking back now, I don't think I fully understood what I had lost. I was too busy surviving to mourn properly. Grief became something I carried quietly while folding clothes, washing dishes, or walking to the grocery store with a basket in my hands. It wasn't dramatic. It was simply always there, like a shadow that followed me wherever I went. People often ask me how my generation became so resilient. The answer isn't that we were born stronger. The answer is that life demanded more from us before we were ready. Responsibility arrived years before adulthood did. We learned to make difficult decisions with the hearts of children because waiting to grow up wasn't an option. Looking back, I wish I could tell that frightened 15-year-old girl that one day she would smile again. But at the time, all she knew was that tomorrow's work had to be finished before the sun went down. That was how we survived, not by pretending life was fair, but by accepting that some burdens simply had to be carried, one day at a time. People often tell me that life was simpler back then, and in one way, they're right. But not for the reason they think. Life was simpler because we had fewer choices. Today, people can spend weeks deciding which university to attend, what career to pursue, or even which city they want to live in. They have the freedom to dream first and figure out the details later. In my world, dreams came second. Responsibility always came first. When I was 16, one of my teachers asked me to stay after class. I remember thinking I had done something wrong. Instead, she smiled and placed a brochure on my desk. It was from a college about 2 hours away. She looked me straight in the eyes and said, "Cicely, you belong there." No one had ever said anything like that to me before. She told me I was one of the brightest students she had ever taught. She believed I could become a teacher, a writer, or anything else I wanted if I continued my education. For the first time in my life, I allowed myself to imagine a future beyond our little farmhouse. I pictured myself walking across a college campus with books in my arms instead of buckets of water. I imagined sitting in classrooms instead of standing over a wash basin. It was a beautiful dream, even if it lasted only a few days. That evening, I showed the brochure to my mother. She read every word carefully before folding it in half and placing it back into my hands. Then she quietly said, "I wish things were different." She didn't tell me I wasn't smart enough. She didn't say college was a waste of time. She simply looked around our small kitchen where my younger brothers were finishing their homework and my little sister was asleep in a chair. "We need you here." That was the entire conversation. There was no argument because there was nothing to argue about. Who would cook dinner if I left? Who would wash the clothes? Who would take care of the younger children while my mother worked? We couldn't afford to hire help, and we certainly couldn't afford tuition. My education wasn't sacrificed because my family didn't believe in it. It was sacrificed because survival demanded it. The next morning, I returned the brochure to my teacher. She looked at me for a long moment, and I could see the disappointment in her eyes. She wanted to persuade me to change my mind, but I think she already understood. Some battles aren't lost because people give up. They're lost because life leaves no room to fight. For many years, I wondered what my life might have become if I had walked through those college doors instead of back into my family's kitchen. Would I have become a teacher? Would I have written books? Would I have traveled beyond Ohio? Those questions stayed with me for decades. But as I grew older, I realized something important. Regret is a heavy suitcase. If you carry it long enough, it steals your strength for the journey ahead. I never went to college, but life became my classroom. Every hardship taught me patience. Every sacrifice taught me love. Every disappointment taught me resilience. I didn't earn a diploma, but I earned something just as valuable, the quiet confidence that comes from doing what needed to be done, even when no one applauded you for it. Looking back now, I still miss the future I never had. But I no longer mourn it. Because sometimes the life you never planned becomes the one that teaches you the greatest lessons of all. By the time I was 19, I had already lived through enough hardship to feel much older than I really was. I wasn't looking for romance. I wasn't dreaming about fairy tales or grand adventures. I was simply trying to build a life that felt a little less uncertain than the one I had known growing up. That was when I met Arthur. He worked at the local hardware store, and every Saturday I stopped by to buy supplies for our house. At first, he was simply the quiet young man who always carried heavy bags to my wagon without being asked. He wasn't flashy or particularly handsome in the way magazines described handsome men. But he had kind eyes, a gentle smile, and a way of listening that made you feel like your words truly mattered. One rainy afternoon, after helping me load sacks of flour and coal, he asked if I would like to have coffee with him after work. I almost said no. Not because I didn't like him, but because I wasn't sure I remembered how to enjoy myself. For years, my life had revolved around responsibility. There had always been someone to care for, something to clean, or another problem waiting at home. The idea of sitting in a cafe simply to talk felt strangely unfamiliar. But I said yes. That evening we talked for nearly 3 hours. He asked about my family, my father, and my younger brothers and sister. Most people quickly change the subject whenever I mention loss, but Arthur didn't. He listened quietly, without trying to fix my pain. Sometimes the greatest kindness isn't offering answers. It's being willing to hear someone else's story. A year later, we were married. I truly loved him. Even after all these years, I will never pretend otherwise. But I also want to tell you something that people rarely admit about my generation. Love was only part of marriage. For many women, marriage was also the only practical path toward building a stable future. Few careers were open to us. Few people expected young women to live independently. Society quietly assumed that a woman would become someone's wife before she became anything else. I didn't question those expectations because almost no one around me did. Within 6 years, we welcomed 3 beautiful children into our family. Motherhood filled my heart with a kind of love I had never known before. The first time I held my oldest son, I promised myself that he would never doubt how deeply he was loved. When our daughters arrived, that promise only grew stronger. But love did not make the work easier. There were no washing machines in our home during those early years. Every Monday, I scrubbed piles of clothes by hand until my fingers turned red and numb. I cooked every meal from scratch, baked bread, mended torn clothes, cleaned the house, cared for sick children, and somehow tried to make each day feel warm and safe for my family. Many evenings, after everyone else had gone to bed, I looked at my reflection in the kitchen window and barely recognized the woman staring back at me. I wasn't unhappy. I wasn't ungrateful. I was simply disappearing. Somewhere between changing diapers, washing dishes, and preparing tomorrow's meals, I had stopped asking myself who Suzalie was beyond being a wife and a mother. Looking back now, I realized that countless women of my generation carried that same quiet question in their hearts. We loved our families completely, yet somewhere deep inside, we wondered if there was still a part of ourselves waiting to be rediscovered. For many years, my life followed the same quiet rhythm. I woke before sunrise, prepared breakfast, packed lunches, washed clothes, cleaned the house, and spent every waking hour taking care of someone else. By the time the children were asleep, I was too exhausted to think about anything except tomorrow's list of chores. Days became weeks, weeks became years, and somewhere along the way, I stopped asking myself what I wanted. One afternoon, while returning a few borrowed books to our small-town library, I noticed a handwritten sign near the front desk. Part-time assistant needed. I stood there for several minutes, staring at those 4 simple words. Something inside me came alive. I had always loved books. As a little girl, I borrowed every novel the library would allow, escaping into stories whenever I could steal a quiet hour. Books reminded me that the world was much bigger than the little farmhouse where I had grown up. They gave me hope during difficult times and taught me lessons that no classroom ever could. Without thinking too much, I filled out an application. A week later, I was offered the job. When I told Arthur, he smiled and said, "If it makes you happy, we'll find a way." But not everyone shared his opinion. His mother looked at me as if I had announced I was leaving my family forever. "A married woman belongs at home," she said firmly. "Your children need you. A good wife doesn't work outside the house." For a moment, I felt like the frightened young girl who had once folded away her college dream without a single argument. The old part of me wanted to apologize, to say she was right, to quietly give up once again. But something had changed. Perhaps it was age. Perhaps it was years of putting everyone else first. Or perhaps I had simply grown tired of believing that my own happiness mattered less than everyone else's expectations. For the first time in my life, I answered calmly. I'll still be a good mother, I said. I'll still love my family, but I would also like to remember who I am. The room fell silent. Arthur reached across the table, took my hand, and gently squeezed it. I think that's fair, he said. Those 4 words meant more to me than he probably ever realized. Working at the library didn't make us rich. In fact, my paycheck was quite small, but what I earned couldn't be measured in dollars. Every afternoon, I helped children discover their first favorite books. I organized shelves, recommended novels, and listened to elderly visitors tell stories about their own lives. I learned something new almost every day, and for the first time in years, people called me Cicely instead of simply Mom or Mrs. Wilson. I had missed hearing my own name. The work reminded me that I was still growing, that becoming a wife and a mother hadn't erased the curious young woman who once dreamed of college. Looking back now, I realize something I wish every young woman could understand. Loving your family should never require abandoning yourself. You can be devoted without disappearing. You can care deeply for others while still protecting a small corner of your life that belongs only to you. The library didn't change my entire life overnight. It changed something even more important. It gave me permission to believe that I mattered too. And sometimes, that single belief is enough to help a person find herself again after years of quietly being lost. People sometimes ask me what life was like after the children grew older. They imagine that once the babies were sleeping through the night and the house became a little quieter, everything must have become easier. I wish that had been true. The truth is, our struggles simply changed their shape. Arthur worked hard every single day. I worked at the library several afternoons each week while still taking care of our home. Together we earned enough to survive, but very rarely enough to feel secure. Every month was a careful balancing act. We paid the mortgage first, bought groceries second, and hoped nothing unexpected would happen before Arthur received his next paycheck. Because if something did happen, we had nowhere to turn. Today, many people can apply for assistance, use a credit card in an emergency, or search online for affordable solutions. Back then, families like ours depended almost entirely on themselves. If the roof leaked, you climbed up and fixed it. If the car broke down, you borrowed tools from a neighbor and prayed you could repair it yourself. Hiring professionals was a luxury we simply couldn't afford. Medical bills frightened us more than almost anything else. I remember one winter when our youngest daughter developed a high fever that refused to go away. The doctor examined her, prescribed medicine, and assured us she would recover. I was grateful beyond words, but when I saw the bill, my stomach tightened with fear. We didn't know how we were going to pay it. Arthur quietly took on extra shifts without complaining. I picked up additional hours at the library whenever they were available. We stopped buying anything that wasn't absolutely necessary. No new clothes. No family outings. No small treats for ourselves. Every dollar went toward keeping our daughter healthy. Looking back now, I realize how close many ordinary families lived to disaster. One illness. One accident. One unexpected repair. Sometimes that was all it took to push a family into debt they could never escape. Yet despite those constant worries, we found ways to protect our children from carrying the same burden. We never discussed unpaid bills at the dinner table. We celebrated birthdays with homemade cakes instead of expensive gifts. Christmas presents were often simple toys Arthur built in the garage with scraps of wood, but our children smiled just as brightly as if they had received the newest treasures from a store. Children don't measure love by the price of a gift. They measure it by the people standing beside them. When I look at the world today, I see conveniences that my younger self could never have imagined. Warm houses with the push of a button. Washing machines that finish hours of work in less than an hour. Grocery stores filled with food from every season. Phones that allow parents to hear their children's voices no matter how far apart they live. These are wonderful blessings. But I also hope people remember that comfort is something generations before them worked incredibly hard to build. My generation wasn't stronger because we enjoyed hardship. We were strong because hardship gave us no alternative. And if there is one lesson I hope younger people carry with them, it is this: never mistake convenience for necessity, and never forget to be grateful for the ordinary comforts that once felt like impossible dreams. Those small blessings are often the quiet rewards of sacrifices made long before we were born. Arthur and I spent 56 years building a life together. When you've shared more than half a century with someone, you begin to believe they will always be there. Not because you forget that life is fragile, but because their presence becomes as familiar as the sunrise. I knew the sound of his footsteps before he opened the front door. I knew exactly how he liked his coffee and which chair he would choose after dinner. We had grown old side by side, and without realizing it, we had become part of each other's everyday routine. Then, one ordinary morning, everything changed. Arthur suffered a stroke. The doctors did everything they could, but sometimes love is not enough to keep someone here. A few days later, I found myself sitting beside his hospital bed, holding the same hand that had reached for mine so many years earlier across our kitchen table. It was warm, but it no longer squeezed back. When he took his final breath, the quiet in the room felt louder than any sound I had ever heard. I was 75 years old. Most people imagine that by 75, life has already taught you everything you need to know. They assume losing someone after such a long marriage somehow hurts less because you've had so many years together. They couldn't be more wrong. Grief doesn't become smaller because you're older. If anything, it becomes deeper, because every corner of your life reminds you of the person who is missing. For weeks after the funeral, I caught myself setting out 2 coffee cups every morning before realizing I only needed one. Sometimes I would hear a floorboard creak and instinctively look toward the door, expecting Arthur to walk inside with his familiar smile. Loneliness has a strange way of speaking. It whispers in empty rooms and quiet evenings. At first, I wasn't sure I knew how to live alone. Arthur had always handled the repairs around the house. He fixed leaking faucets, mowed the lawn, replaced broken shelves, and climbed onto the roof whenever storms damaged the shingles. Suddenly those responsibilities belonged to me. The first time the kitchen sink started leaking, I sat on the floor and cried. Not because the repair was impossible, but because it reminded me that he wasn't coming home to fix it. Eventually, I wiped away my tears, found the toolbox in the garage, and opened the instruction manual. It took me nearly 3 hours, several mistakes, and more patience than I thought I possessed, but when I finally stopped the leak, I smiled through my tears. It wasn't about the sink. It was about discovering that I was still capable. Over the following years, I learned to do many things I had once believed only Arthur could do. I changed light fixtures, planted a vegetable garden, painted the porch, and even repaired a loose fence after a heavy storm. Every small accomplishment reminded me of something life had been teaching me since childhood. Strength doesn't disappear with age. Sometimes it simply waits for the moment you need it most. Now, at 91, people often ask me the secret to a happy life. I don't think happiness comes from having a perfect life. It comes from learning to notice the small blessings that survive even after heartbreak. A warm cup of coffee on a quiet morning. A handwritten letter from a grandchild. The sound of birds outside my window. A neighbor stopping by just to say hello. These moments seem ordinary, but together they become the pieces that gently heal a broken heart. Life has taken many things from me, but it has also given me something precious, the understanding that even after great loss, there is always another sunrise waiting for those willing to greet it. Now, at 91 years old, people often ask me if I wish I could go back and live my life all over again. The answer usually surprises them.
No.
Not because I regret my life, but because I understand it. If I could return to my childhood, I would once again feel the bitter cold inside our tiny farmhouse. I would once again watch my mother's tired hands crack from endless work. I would lose my father too soon, give up my dream of college, spend years wondering where my own identity had gone, and one day hold Arthur's hand as I said goodbye for the last time. Those memories are precious because they shaped me. But I would never wish those hardships on anyone. Sometimes I hear young people say, "Life was better back then." I smile because I know they are imagining a version of the past that never truly existed. Every generation carries its own burdens. Mine struggled with poverty, limited opportunities, and physical hardship. Yours faces uncertainty, constant pressure, loneliness, and a world that never seems to slow down. Pain cannot be measured like a competition. Just because your struggles look different from mine doesn't make them any less real. That is something I wish more people understood. I don't believe young people today are weaker. I believe they have simply grown up in a different world. Many of the comforts you enjoy today, warm homes, modern medicine, instant communication, and opportunities to choose your own path, are not signs that you have become soft. They are signs that humanity has made progress. And that is something worth celebrating, not criticizing. But there is one lesson from my generation that I hope never disappears. Do not let comfort convince you that you no longer need courage. Life has a way of changing without asking for permission. One phone call can alter your future. One illness can test your faith. One loss can leave your heart feeling empty. When those moments arrive, expensive possessions, social media followers, and perfect plans will not carry you through. Your character will. Your willingness to stand up after falling will. Your ability to keep loving even after heartbreak will. Looking back, I realized that the greatest gift hardship ever gave me was confidence. Not the loud confidence that demands attention, but the quiet confidence that whispers, "You've survived difficult days before. You will survive this one too." That kind of strength cannot be bought. It is earned one difficult day at a time. So if my long life has taught me anything, it is this. Be grateful for modern comforts, but never become dependent on them. Work hard even when no one is watching. Love people while you still have the chance. Forgive before bitterness steals your peace. And never underestimate what an ordinary person can endure when love gives them a reason to keep going. I have lived through 91 years of joy and sorrow, abundance and scarcity, hope and heartbreak. If I leave behind only one message, let it be this. Life was never easier in the past. It was simply different. Don't admire my generation because we suffered. Instead, learn from the resilience that suffering created. Build your own strength in the life you have been given. Cherish the people who walk beside you today, and remember that happiness is rarely found in perfect circumstances. More often, it quietly grows inside a grateful heart that chooses to keep moving forward, no matter how difficult yesterday may have been. That, more than anything else, is the wisdom I hope lives on long after I am gone. If you have listened to my story all the way to the end, then thank you. Not because my life was extraordinary, but because it was ordinary. There were no grand adventures, no famous achievements, and no moments that changed the course of history. I was simply a little girl born into a poor family who did the best she could with the life she was given. I became a daughter, a sister, a wife, a mother, a grandmother, and eventually an old woman with more memories than years left ahead of her. And perhaps that is exactly why my story matters. Most of us will never be remembered in history books. Our names won't appear in newspapers. The world may never know what we sacrificed or the tears we cried in silence. But the people we love will remember how we made them feel. That is the legacy that truly lasts. When I look back over 91 years, I don't remember every bill we struggled to pay or every difficult winter we survived. Time has a gentle way of softening the sharpest edges of pain. Instead, I remember my mother's smile when she managed to put food on the table after a long day. I remember Arthur laughing as our children chased each other around the backyard. I remember reading bedtime stories, holding tiny hands, and hearing my grandchildren call me grandma for the very first time. Those are the moments that stayed. Not because they were perfect, but because they were filled with love. If I could sit across the table from my younger self, the frightened 14-year-old girl who had just lost her father, I wouldn't tell her that life was about to become easier. Because it wouldn't. I wouldn't promise that every dream would come true. Because some dreams never did. Instead, I would take her hand and say, "You are stronger than you know. One day, you will look back at everything that frightened you, and you will realize it shaped the woman you became." I believe the same is true for you. No matter how old you are or what burden you are carrying today, this difficult season will not last forever. One day, it will become part of your story. The pain you feel today may become the wisdom that helps someone else tomorrow. The strength you are building now may one day give another person the courage to keep going. That is how hope travels from one generation to the next. We don't pass down perfect lives. We pass down resilience. We pass down kindness. We pass down the quiet belief that even after heartbreak, there is still goodness waiting to be found. So don't waste your time wishing you had lived in another generation. Don't envy the past, and don't fear the future. Instead, live fully in the time you've been given. Call your parents while you still can. Hold your children a little longer. Thank your friends more often. Forgive when forgiveness is possible. And never assume that ordinary days are unimportant, because one day they will become the memories you treasure most. As for me, I have no desire to relive my life. I have already lived it. Every joy, every mistake, every sacrifice, and every goodbye helped shape the woman I am today. I leave this world with no perfect answers, only one simple truth that 91 years have taught me. Life is not measured by how easy it was. It is measured by how much love you gave, how many times you chose to stand back up after falling, and whether you left the hearts of others a little warmer than you found them. If you can do that, then no matter where you come from or what you have endured, you have lived a life worth remembering. As I sit by my window today, watching the afternoon sun slowly disappear behind the trees, I often think about how quickly a lifetime passes. When you're young, you believe you have endless tomorrows. You rush through your days, always looking ahead, always chasing the next goal. You think happiness will arrive when you earn more money, buy a bigger house, find the perfect partner, or finally have enough time to relax. I used to think that too. But after 91 years, I've learned that life doesn't wait for us to feel ready. The days become months. The months become years. And before you know it, you're looking back, wondering where all the ordinary moments went. If there is one mistake I see people making today, it is believing that happiness is somewhere in the future. They postpone joy until everything is perfect. They tell themselves, I'll spend more time with my family after I finish this project. I'll call my parents next week. I'll take that trip someday. I'll slow down when life becomes less busy. The truth is, life rarely becomes less busy. There will always be another responsibility, another bill to pay, another problem waiting around the corner. If you keep waiting for the perfect moment to live, you may discover that the moment has quietly passed you by. Looking back, I don't remember the days when everything went according to plan. I remember the imperfect moments. I remember Arthur dancing with me in our tiny kitchen while dinner burned on the stove because we were laughing too hard to notice. I remember my children running through the yard with muddy shoes after a summer rainstorm. I remember sitting beside my mother on the front porch without saying a single word because we didn't need words to understand each other. Those simple moments became the richest memories of my life. No expensive gift could ever replace them. No amount of money could buy them back. That is why I want to leave you with one final piece of advice. Don't measure your life by what you own. Measure it by the people who would miss you if you were gone. Don't ask yourself how successful you look. Ask yourself whether someone feels safer, happier, or more loved because you were part of their life. In the end, no one remembers how many hours you worked or how impressive your resume looked. They remember your kindness. They remember your patience. They remember whether you listened when they needed someone to hear them. Those are the things that outlive us. As for me, I know my journey is closer to its end than its beginning. That thought doesn't frighten me anymore. I have loved deeply. I have cried more times than I can count. I have made mistakes, forgiven others, and learned to forgive myself. Most importantly, I have learned that every season of life, whether filled with joy or sorrow, has something valuable to teach us. So wherever you are today, whether life feels easy or unbearably difficult, don't lose hope. Keep going. Love generously. Be grateful for ordinary days. And remember that one day, many years from now, someone may look at your life the way you've looked at mine, Not because it was perfect, but because you chose courage over fear, kindness over bitterness, and hope over despair. If my story has given you even one reason to appreciate your own life a little more today, then every lesson I have carried for 91 years has been worth sharing. Before I say goodbye, there is one last thought I would like to leave with you. When I was a little girl, I believed that wisdom belonged only to old people. I thought growing older automatically meant understanding life. But after living for 91 years, I have discovered that age alone teaches nothing. It is the way we respond to life that shapes who we become. Some people grow old carrying bitterness in their hearts. They spend years replaying old disappointments, blaming others for the opportunities they never had. They allow regret to become the loudest voice in their lives. Others experience the very same hardships and somehow choose gratitude instead. The difference is not what happened to them. The difference is what they decided to carry forward. I could have spent my life mourning the education I never received. I could have remained angry that I lost my father when I was still a child. I could have blamed life for every difficult season, every financial struggle, every sleepless night, and every painful goodbye. There were certainly moments when I wanted to, but eventually I realized something that changed everything. You cannot move toward peace while dragging yesterday behind you. Forgiveness does not erase the past. Acceptance does not pretend the pain never existed. Instead, they allow you to stop living inside yesterday and begin appreciating the gift of today. That lesson came slowly. It arrived through thousands of ordinary mornings, quiet evenings, and small decisions to keep moving forward, even when life felt unbearably heavy. Looking back now, I understand that happiness was never waiting for me at the end of my journey. It was quietly walking beside me all along. It was hidden inside simple conversations around the dinner table, inside my children's laughter, inside Arthur's gentle smile, inside the smell of fresh bread baking in the kitchen, inside the peaceful silence of watching snow fall outside the window after everyone else had gone to bed. Those moments never seemed extraordinary while they were happening. Only later did I realize they were the true treasures of my life. If you are listening to my story today, I want you to promise yourself one thing. Don't wait until you're 91 to appreciate the life you already have. Don't wait for retirement to spend time with your family. Don't wait for tragedy to tell someone you love them. Don't wait until someone is gone before realizing how much they meant to you. Life is unpredictable. None of us knows how many ordinary mornings we still have. That uncertainty should not frighten us. It should remind us to live more intentionally. So hold someone's hand a little longer. Listen a little more carefully. Forgive a little sooner. Laugh a little more often. And remember that every ordinary day you are living right now may one day become the memory that brings you the greatest comfort. As my journey slowly comes to an end, I don't hope people remember me because I survived difficult times. I hope they remember that even in the hardest seasons, I never stopped believing in kindness, in family, and in the quiet strength of an ordinary life. If my story stays with you after this moment, let it not be because of the hardships I endured. Let it be because it reminds you to cherish your own story while you're still living it. After all, the greatest wisdom I have learned in 91 years is beautifully simple. A meaningful life is not built through perfect circumstances. It is built one ordinary day, one loving choice, and one grateful heart at a time. As I grew older, people often complimented me by saying, "You're such a strong woman." I always smiled politely, but inside, I wanted to tell them something important. I wasn't born strong. No one enters this world already knowing how to endure heartbreak, loss, disappointment, or fear. Strength is not a gift that some people receive while others do not. It is something life quietly builds inside you, one difficult day at a time. When I was young, I didn't feel brave when my father died. I felt terrified. When I gave up my dream of college, I didn't feel noble. I felt disappointed. When Arthur passed away after 56 years of marriage, I didn't feel resilient. I felt completely lost. But life has a remarkable way of teaching us lessons we never asked to learn. Every hardship I faced forced me to discover a part of myself that I didn't know existed. Each challenge became a question. Will you stop here? or will you keep going? Most of the time, I didn't continue because I felt courageous. I continued because there was simply no other choice. Years later, I realized that those ordinary decisions had slowly become the foundation of my confidence. Not the loud confidence that demands attention or proves itself to others. The quiet confidence that whispers, "You've survived difficult days before. You'll survive this one too." That kind of confidence cannot be borrowed from another person. It cannot be purchased. And it certainly cannot be learned from reading inspirational quotes. It comes only from walking through the storm yourself. I sometimes worry that modern life has convinced people that comfort is the highest goal. We search for the fastest solution, the easiest path, and the least amount of discomfort. While there is nothing wrong with making life easier, we should never believe that avoiding every struggle will make us happier. Some of the greatest gifts in my life were hidden inside the moments I wanted to escape. Poverty taught me gratitude. Responsibility taught me discipline. Loss taught me compassion. Failure taught me humility. And grief taught me how deeply the human heart is capable of loving. Without those experiences, I would have lived an easier life, but I don't believe I would have lived a wiser one. Please don't misunderstand me. I am not saying you should seek suffering. No one should wish for pain. But when hardship finds you, as it eventually finds everyone, I hope you remember that it does not arrive only to take something away. Sometimes it also brings a gift, a stronger character, a kinder heart, a deeper appreciation for ordinary moments, or the quiet realization that you are far more capable than you ever imagined. When I look back over 91 years, I no longer see my life as a collection of painful memories. I see a journey that slowly shaped me into the woman I became. Every challenge left a mark, but each mark became part of a story worth telling. So if life feels difficult for you today, don't assume these days are meaningless. One day, you may discover that the season you once wished would end was actually the season that built the strongest version of yourself. And when that day comes, you won't be grateful for the pain itself. You'll be grateful for the person you became, because you found the courage to walk through it without giving up. The older I became, the more I realized that happiness had been quietly changing its shape all along. When I was a little girl, I thought happiness meant having enough food on the table and warm shoes for the winter. As a young woman, I believed it meant finding someone who would love me for the rest of my life. Later, as a mother, happiness became seeing my children healthy, hearing their laughter fill our home, and knowing they had gone to bed with full stomachs. For many years, I kept believing that happiness was always waiting somewhere ahead. If we could just save a little more money, if the children grew up safely, if Arthur retired, if life became less complicated, then we would finally relax. But life has a funny way of reminding us that there is always another problem waiting around the corner. Just when one worry disappeared, another one arrived. There were unexpected bills, health scares, broken appliances, and days when nothing seemed to go according to plan. If I had continued waiting for the perfect season to be happy, I would have spent my entire life waiting. It wasn't until after Arthur passed away that I truly understood what happiness had been trying to teach me. One quiet morning, I sat alone on the front porch with a cup of coffee. The house was silent. No children running through the hallway. No familiar footsteps behind me. Just birds singing in the distance and the soft breeze moving through the trees. For the first time in many months, I wasn't thinking about what I had lost. I was simply grateful to witness another sunrise. That ordinary morning changed something inside me. I began paying attention to the small gifts that had always surrounded me, but had gone unnoticed while I was busy chasing bigger dreams. A handwritten birthday card from my granddaughter. Fresh tomatoes growing in my little garden. The smell of rain drifting through an open window. A friendly conversation with a neighbor who stopped by for no particular reason. The sound of children laughing in the park across the street. None of these moments lasted very long. Yet somehow, together they made life feel rich. People often ask me what the secret to happiness is. I don't think there is a secret. I think happiness is simply the ability to notice what is already present before life changes again. Because it always changes. The children grow up. Parents grow old. Friends move away. Loved ones leave this world. Even our strongest bodies eventually become slower than they once were. Nothing lasts forever. That truth used to frighten me. Now it comforts me. It reminds me not to waste today wishing for tomorrow. If you are waiting for a perfect life before allowing yourself to feel grateful, you may miss the very moments that will one day mean the most to you. The happiest people I have ever known were not the richest or the luckiest. They were the ones who learned to treasure ordinary days while they still had them. After 91 years, I have come to believe that happiness is rarely found in extraordinary events. More often, it is quietly hidden inside everyday moments: a warm cup of coffee, a gentle smile from someone you love, a peaceful evening after a long day, or simply the privilege of waking up to see another sunrise. Those simple blessings may seem small while they are happening, but one day, when you look back over your life, you may discover that they were never small at all. They were everything. Before I leave you, I'd like to speak directly to those who are younger than I am. I've heard people say that your generation has it easy. They point to smartphones, modern medicine, fast transportation, and all the conveniences that never existed when I was young. Some even say that because life is more comfortable today, people have become weaker. I don't believe that. I don't think your generation is weak. I think your challenges are simply different from mine. When I was growing up, our struggles were easy to see. Poverty had a face. Hunger had a sound. Hard work left blisters on your hands and aching muscles in your back. We worried about having enough food, enough firewood, or enough money to pay the doctor. Today, many of your battles happen quietly. You carry pressure that follows you everywhere through a screen in your pocket. You're expected to compare your life to thousands of other lives every single day. Many people feel lonely even while surrounded by others. Success seems to arrive earlier for everyone else, and failure often feels public instead of private. Pain has changed its appearance, but pain is still pain. That is why I would never compare my struggles to yours. Every generation has mountains to climb. What matters is not which mountain is higher. What matters is whether you keep climbing. If there is one lesson I hope my life has given you, it is this. Don't be afraid of difficult seasons. The strongest parts of your character are rarely built during the easiest years of your life. They are built when your plans fall apart. When someone disappoints you. When you lose something you thought you couldn't live without. When life asks more of you than you think you can give. Those are the moments that quietly shape the person you are becoming. And one day, you will look back and realize that what felt like the end was often the beginning of your greatest growth. So be patient with yourself. You don't need to have your entire life figured out today. You don't need to become perfect before you deserve happiness.
Take one step.
Then another. Keep learning.
Keep forgiving.
Keep loving the people who matter most. Most importantly, never allow bitterness to replace hope. Life will disappoint you from time to time. People will let you down. Dreams may change. But as long as you continue choosing kindness over resentment, gratitude over complaint, and courage over fear, you will never truly lose your way. I have lived through wars, economic hardship, heartbreak, loss, and more change than I ever thought possible. Looking back now, I can honestly say that the things I feared most were never the moments that defined me. The moments that defined me were the choices I made afterward. The choice to stand up one more time. The choice to love again after loss. The choice to believe that tomorrow was still worth welcoming, even after yesterday had broken my heart. If my 91 years have taught me anything, it is that resilience is not something we inherit. It is something we practice. Day after day. Choice after choice. Until one morning, without even realizing it, we discover that we have become stronger than we ever imagined. So don't spend your life wishing you had been born in another era. Live fully in this one. Face your own challenges with honesty and courage. Create your own story of perseverance. And someday, many years from now, I hope you'll look back on your life with the same quiet peace that fills my heart today, not because your journey was easy, but because you never stopped moving forward, no matter how difficult the road became. As I come to the end of my story, I find myself thinking less about the years behind me and more about the people who will continue walking after I'm gone. 91 years sounds like a very long time, And in many ways, it is. I have lived through seasons of abundance and seasons of hunger. I have celebrated births and mourned deaths. I have watched little children become parents and parents become grandparents. I have seen the world change faster than I ever imagined possible. Horse-drawn wagons became automobiles. Black and white televisions became tiny screens that fit into a pocket. The impossible slowly became ordinary. But no matter how much the world changed, one truth never did. The human heart still longs for the same things. We all want to feel loved. We all hope to belong somewhere. We all search for meaning. And no matter how old we become, we all hope that our lives mattered to someone. When I was younger, I believed success was measured by what people could see. A nice home, financial security, respect from others. Those things certainly make life more comfortable, and there is nothing wrong with working hard to achieve them. But now, standing near the end of my journey, I measure success very differently. Success is having children who remember your kindness more than your mistakes. Success is having friends who smile when they speak your name. Success is leaving behind memories that bring comfort instead of regret. And success is being able to close your eyes at night knowing that, even though you weren't perfect, you loved people with all the heart you had. If I could leave one gift for every person listening today, it would not be money. Money disappears. It would not be advice. Advice is often forgotten. Instead, I would leave you with perspective. Remember that every difficult season will eventually become a chapter in your story. Remember that the people sitting beside you today will not always be there tomorrow. Remember that time is the only treasure every human being spends at exactly the same rate. None of us knows how many mornings remain. That is why every ordinary day deserves to be treated as something extraordinary. Don't wait until life slows down before you begin living. Don't postpone your happiness until you have achieved one more goal. Don't let pride keep you from saying, "I'm sorry." Don't let fear keep you from saying, "I love you." Years from now, you won't remember every deadline you met or every possession you owned. You will remember conversations around the dinner table. You will remember laughter that made your stomach hurt. You will remember the people who stayed beside you when life became difficult. Those are the moments that quietly become the true wealth of a lifetime. If my story has touched your heart, then don't honor it by feeling sorry for the hardships I endured. Honor it by living your own life more fully. Call someone you've been meaning to call. Forgive someone you've been waiting to forgive. Spend less time worrying about things that won't matter in 10 years and more time appreciating the people who matter today. That is the wisdom life slowly whispered to me over 91 years. And now, it is my turn to pass it on. So this is not really goodbye. It is simply one old woman handing her story to the next generation, hoping that somewhere, in a quiet moment, these words remind you to be a little kinder, a little braver, a little more grateful, and a little more patient with yourself and with others. Because in the end, a meaningful life is not built from perfect moments. It is built from ordinary days lived with courage, compassion, gratitude, and love. And if you can do that, then no matter where life takes you, you'll have lived a story worth telling.